Yeah, that's true, Bubbles. Good afternoon. There's not. I was kind of just having a play, just a short. Um, I'm not playing a game. As far as I'm aware, that there's no um, actual rules against doing this. It's a train. It's a simulation of one, and it's 2015. Um, mm, I'm not sure. There was nobody else on Train Simulator, and there are a few people that are interested in trains and things, so I just thought I'd do this. Uh, if Twitch say I can't, I'm quite happy to move it, but you do get other people like the Danish guy, for example, who's currently in World of Warcraft, and he's doing leatherwork. So. But that's all. It's kind of a quiet place as well, just to come on and just have a go at doing something that I haven't been. Well, I did do this on stream for a while, but kind of staying out of the way, if you see what I mean. Just a quiet hour or so, just practicing doing some different things. But welcome and hello. Well, I guess that's no problem. I read that two different ways then. Yeah, that's not a problem. Thank you. As I say, if once Twitch staff come on and say, then by all means I'll shift. I'm not particularly here for an argument. It's just as I say, not exactly advertising, if you like, creative, but getting people. If there are some people, and I mean I don't know if you ever watch on an evening. I kind of enjoy playing Train Simulator, so don't do it very often, but I do watch on a weekday evening. As after I finish streaming, there's a guy called Matt Pendleton, who is actually one of the game developers, works for Dovetail Games, and he streams every evening. And there's quite a lot of people watching him. I'm not particularly interested of streaming then, but it was just as there are a few people around, so if they actually monitor Train Simulator, then they may well notice somebody on. And although it's part of the game, Train Simulator also has its own ability for people to create their own models and create their own routes and scenarios within it, so it's kind of a creative thing as well, so they might be less vociferous about people must be playing games. Although, as I say, it's not actually in Twitch's terms and conditions that you even have to broadcast in the right game section. I was reading that the other day, or reading them again the other day. I could stream this in stream Train Simulator in World of Warcraft, because there's nothing that actually says you have to get it right. So kind of funny in a way. I know it's all about convention, what people expect. And although it isn't the game itself includes the ability to take screenshots, in-game screenshots of which a lot of people enjoy doing, and create Facebook pages and all sorts out of it. And being able to maybe I keep thinking about maybe next time I play a game, taking a few screenshots and actually using them as the basis of an image or a picture. So it would still be related, but there we go. but thank you for mentioning it. So this is really just continuing on the piece I studied a while ago for practice before I did the Pussycats. Kind of always like to finish stuff that I start. Don't always succeed, but it does allow me to make a mess of things and not worry about it. That's why I'm doing it on hardboard. Something like this as well, with it being sort of a consistent colour, it's like it's red. It allows me to develop trying to keep a consistent shade across things, so when I come to do things like the cats or whatever, then I've got better control, because as you can see around here I've not been particularly good at it. So if I make a mess of it on here, it doesn't really matter too much. Because what I am likely to get on here more than I am on creative is people saying that doesn't look like a class 66 or whatever. A lot of people apparently have their own affinity or favourite locomotives, and they have to be right. They know the individual history of the actual locomotive and the based on its serial number, where it was made, how many people have driven it, all these sorts of things. Well, that's not that that's saying anything to be wrong. It can be interesting to know the history of things and stuff like that. I mean, that's what a lot of history books are all about, really. So I'm just creating myself an outline, because this area around here is black, so and the lights aren't, so don't want to cover them to start with. Might actually be better doing that with a different pen, so let's switch pens. I haven't used this pen for a long time. It's a writing pen, but it's got a fairly fine tip, so it should be quite good for doing this. Can use it a bit like a paintbrush. Probably a bit too hot though. Let's turn it down a bit. One thing with this particular tool, even when it's turned down, is that it's quite easy to get really dark wood if you're not really careful. And if that's not what you're intending to do, you've got to be really quick about it. It's really like using something like a 6B pencil or something like that. It's so it marks so easily. It's quite good fun, is this? One of these days what I'm going to have to try doing is try using it like a pencil and actually drawing with it. Well, that was easier than using the shader. I shall have to remember that. The only problem with pyrography machines is wires all over the place. fun part often, as in challenging, is trying to get the very lighter shades of things sometimes. Because this area just here is a really light shade of the yellow, or lighter shade of the yellow, shall we say. It'd be a bit easier if I was doing this on a whiter wood rather than this hardboard, but if I can do it on here, I can do it on lighter wood. Sometimes doing real objects can be a little bit easier, because especially shiny ones, because you get real world reflections and light bouncing around, so a shiny object is rarely actually all one colour or shade because of that. So that's what I'm trying to do, is get a consistent shade. If it's not, it kind of looks more realistic. Not bad. Okay, let's turn the heat up a bit. Okay. Yeah. as the whole of this upper front is red, I now need to just make this shade darker, otherwise it looks too much like the yellow. Did I finish the cat? No, I haven't finished the cat lol kid lol. I'm leaving that while the stream tonight, so anybody who watches regularly like that can get to see the whole piece done end to end. But I just felt like doing something a little bit different. So this is a practice piece I started a couple or so weeks ago. It's actually the first thing I ever streamed, and it's a practice piece, which is why I'm doing it on hardboard. It has its own different challenges, and it's just a sort of an ad hoc stream, and one I can just sit back and just sort of enjoy the art, so to speak. And so that's why I'm doing this, and it just gives me a bit chance to practice new techniques, or just try out different things, just to see how well they work without doing them on a more valuable piece. If I mess this up, I am not that bothered about it, with it being just on hardboard. So I can try out things that possibly would go wrong, like using a really hot tool and trying to move fast, or things like using a writing tool, which I did these things with, and finding out that it works very like doing a paintbrush. Kind of haven't really used it in that way before, so. That's more or less the same colour. I've missed the handrail out on here. Oh no, I can put that in. Because the other thing, lol kid, is that people might be a bit sick of seeing the pussycat, so if anybody is around on a Saturday afternoon and then they get to see something a little bit different. I mean, an hour or so I might switch and do a completely different, actually another version of this engine, but I might do a completely using a different art form altogether, just for some fun, keep it interesting for me as well, just to try out different things. That's not too bad. Got the white handrails in at least. Anybody who's watching, I'm mainly being silent. Normally when I'm streaming I'm almost always talking quite a bit. Just this afternoon, just an ad hoc stream whilst I just practice some pyrography, and I'm more or less just sitting back and enjoying it. But if you have any questions, I don't mind answering them. Feel free to ask in chat, and I will say things from time to time, but just a quiet, calm afternoon of art. Mind you, not that you should be anything else than calm when you're driving a tool around that's in excess of 200 degrees. So, we'll leave that. This is a real hard surface to try and scrape erase on because it actually kind of destroys a very smooth surface. Just trying to put a few highlights on what is effectively a handrail. Which I haven't represented very well on here, but that's the point of practice. Oops. This tool needs a lot more heat than the writing tool does. I'm only sort of trying to get the main features in here, and at least something that represents or at least looks somewhat similar. Jam Jam, good afternoon. Do you think that should Edinburgh to King's Cross East Coast? I assume you mean something along the lines of operate it. It would be nice if they did. I'm not sure they ever will though. I mean, they're doing the West Coast high speed line first, aren't they? And then there is some discussion of doing the East Coast. Don't know how far it goes up, to be honest. Anyway, I mean, I obviously know the main route is up to Newcastle, and then it can, it then goes from there, but I'm not aware as to whether that's actually part of the East Coast main line going up as far as into Scotland. What do you think about it? me move that scalpel somewhere safer. If they did upgrade the light, mind you, they've got even the high-speed line is kind of slow really these days, isn't it? I mean, what they're talking about 150, 160 miles an hour, which is just going to shave times rather than actually radically change them. Kind of neat to get up to around about the 200 miles an hour before you really, I think, see a significant difference. I think even with the extension of the west coast across the Pennines towards Leeds, they're only talking about 2 hours. That route, I know it's a longer route, but that route, sort of 2 hours, leads to London. And if I remember correctly, it's only about 2 hours 10 minutes now, so there won't be. I can't see there being much of a change from that. Okay. If they can get sort of journey times of sort of Newcastle or Newcastle to London 2 hours, and I guess would put Edinburgh at something like 2.5 to 3, then I think that would make a heck of a difference to rail travel in the UK. And it certainly makes almost commuting over those routes somewhat more viable, shall we say. Day trips out from the lower areas of Scotland or the higher areas of Yorkshire to London, then becomes a day trip, not sort of an extremely long day or an extremely or an overnight stay. And I'm guessing this somewhat similar on the west coast, if they did push the speeds up. It's a bit of a pity in a way they actually haven't taken the chance to do a to really uprate line speeds, because they're building brand new. Oh, sorry, you of course, yeah, sorry, I think of the real one, yeah. East Coast London. That, I mean, it's something I'd love to see in the game, is being able to do the full length of the East Coast. Edinburgh to Newcastle, you can go Newcastle to York, I think, as well. And then it's Peterborough to King's Cross, I think, and there's a big gap in the middle. I'd love to be able to drive the full route, or even York to London. Which the York being the rail town would be a nice one to do on the HST or the newer version, what used to be called the 225, whose name has completely escaped me. But it would be nice to do those. It's a hell of a lot of work though, Jam. I mean, creating routes. I don't know if you've ever tried it. I admit I haven't. But there is a heck of a lot of content in there in terms of work, and there's all sorts of different ways of looking at it. A route that cost you £90, for example, people perhaps wouldn't buy. But if you can get two half routes for £40, as long as they're joined together, and you then ultimately can run them as a single route, that would be nice. but also, there's not only the cost there, but if you to wait 6 years for that long route rather than getting a bit of it in a year or a year and a half, then yeah, London to Edinburgh 4 hours. It's a long journey though. Dillybug, good evening, or good afternoon even. It's not even evening. You see, when I do a random stream in the afternoon on a weekend, I completely forget what the time is. I love doing the the high-speed routes as well. Yeah, to get not easy, but Google Maps to get the basic topography down and then build routes on that. Yeah. Well, I mean that's how I'm assuming that's how the professionals do it. And, they're not going to. Well, I wouldn't have thought they'd be building things completely from scratch. I mean, Google Maps, you've got all the actual routes on there, really, or you can see the train beds. It's quite fascinating sometimes to go onto Google Maps or even Google Earth, and some of the discontinued railways. You can see the rail beds and follow them through where they used to join and meet up with the main lines that are there now. What I'd love to see actually in the game is a real engine. Sounds a bit silly, but being able to take an engine from cold and dark through a proper full startup, so full operations, full simulation. Bit like some of the suppliers do on the flight simulator. Every control is simulated, every control works like it's supposed to do, and if you go from cold and dark, you've got to go through the complete sequence to start up. And I'd love to be able to do that with a train. I think there's a couple of at least one supplier. I think I was watching Matt the other night who sort of suggested that at least one of the suppliers. You had to take the train through a startup sequence. I don't know if it was I can't remember what train it was, or what loco it was rather. But that's kind of an interesting thing I'd like to see. How are you doing, Tillybug? It's we're in a different area today, having some different conversations. And I'm trying to get the same colour to look different shades on here. But that's what practice pieces are about, practicing doing these sorts of things. It's challenging. There we go, they look like that looks better. Now just going to make the edge look sharper. It's got too dark. Oh well, it's not too bad. It's shiny. If it's reflecting something that's on the ground, I can't help that. It would have been easier if I'd done this originally, practiced this on actual lighter board. It'd have been a lot easier to do things like scraping to highlight things. Yeah, I just got that front there. This isn't going to work too well, but Yeah, it's not going to show up too well. Maybe I should have made the whole thing darker. We shall see. No, I haven't finished the kitty cat Tilly. I'm saving that for this evening's stream, so that anybody who's watching, in a pattern regularly gets to see the whole thing. This is a practice piece that I started on my very first stream, and I'm just having a quiet afternoon, quiet couple of hours, doing some practice. And so the pussycat's still here. He's there. He's gone a bit further, obviously, since you last saw him, but so just having a change. In an hour or so, I might change over and do a completely different art form. I've got a a different piece of exactly the same engine, reusing the image a few times. In a different art form, so I may do that in an hour or so, and then this evening's stream I'll carry on with Felix. Now we got I assume they're foot plates here, so dark area just underneath here. Alright. Plus, I quite like this image, so I'd like to finish it. And when I'm streaming during the week, there isn't a lot of time to do other things. Not very successful, but as I say, that's the idea of practice. It's a bit low as well, but yeah, well. No, I'm not. I don't actually keep up on a lot of the train news. I mean, I love the shapes. That's probably part of being an artist. I love the shapes of the trains. The the shapes, the angles, the curves. The streamlining. So take something like a mallard. As opposed to the unstreamlined version of it. I prefer the streamlined version of that class of locomotive, and the HSTs, the Voyager type of thing. I like the curves on that. So I don't actually know what is, and I actually don't know what the Class 801 looks like at all, to be honest. It's kind of not surprising. I mean, they're as you say, 40 years old. That's quite old in these days and age. I mean, they're still amazing locos from the point of view they're pulling, a rake of carriages at 125 miles an hour, and they do it with relative ease, and they're doing it umpteen times a day. I kind of find those train sets fascinating. Is the 801 the one where they're going to make it close couple carriages as well, with where you can actually walk through, so there's no corridor between coaches as such? Just thinking here, Jam Jam, Lol Kid and Tilly generally watch me when I'm in creative on an evening, and it must be a bit surprising when we start talking about locomotives. Don't know a great deal about them. I'm not a fantastic train buff. I enjoy seeing the, as I say, the locos, the shapes, and there's something fascinating about playing the game as well. And I am, at some point later this year, maybe early next year, I will be building myself a train layout in Engage probably. But I love modelling, so that's more. I'm not one to actually go out and sit on stations and watch trains go by. I suppose I should put what looks like the footrest, the step plate on the other side. And the problem is it's going to be in the wrong height, but switch pens. Turn that down. Turn it up a bit. Switching pens because this one's more like a pencil. So I can get straighter line or sharper lines, and it's easier to get darker shades with it. There's a couple of toe lugs on there which I'm not going to try and reproduce. Let's add some more shade underneath here. And I should add some underneath here as well. Doesn't look too bad. Yeah, when we get down into the buffer beam area and the air dam, then there's not going to be a lot of detail. It's so dark down there. This bit wants to be a bit darker. If there's anybody watching who plays flight simulator, train simulator, any of you drive the Class 66 in the game? I've not actually done that yet myself. and I prefer the Freightliner livery, but I just happen to like that green and the way the whole livery is laid out. This is a slightly darker shade of yellow than this area here and this area here, because it's slanting down towards the ground, so it's not getting as much light, and also it's reflecting the darker ground. But it's a relatively subtle difference, so can't go really mad with colouring, and I've got to do it fairly slowly, but not quite as slow as I've got the temperature set at. Okay, yeah, I like the classic. I like the look of the Class 66, and I'm assuming the Class 70 is a similar looking model. I'm not actually looked at that. What I was saying about the HST, mainly, I mean, it's 40 years old. I'm kind of surprised that it's lasted as long as it has done. But those train sets are, I mean, quite amazing, really. Where you've got, you know, the thing is, the engines are dragging that rake of coaches at 125 miles an hour, sort of for 2 hours non-stop almost sometimes, and it's kind of amazing that they haven't replaced it before now. And I have no idea what the 801 looks like. What I've got in the back of my mind is that the 801 will be a streamlined train, of course, but is that the one with the close coupled carriages with where there's full walk-through between them? Kind of, and if I've also got in my mind that they're low slung as well, so they're the internal dimensions of the carriages are slightly lower to the floor, shall we say, so they line up with the platforms a lot better, and you've got higher internal height. That's what I was trying to remember. The class which augmented the old 125 HSTs, they used to get called the 225. Electras was what they used to call them, I think, when they were launched, because of course they were electrically powered. The only thing I don't like about the HSTs, if you ever travel on them, the older 125 diesels, is the smell of the brakes when they go on. That sort of asbestos smelling, I don't know what the brake compound actually is, but that sort of really sort of not very nice smell off the brakes when they get applied. Now this area of yellow down here again is a fairly light shade, similar to the rail front there. Maybe should make this front, the upper front, a bit darker as well, with it being a fairly dark red. I'm actually quite looking forward to. I backed on Kickstarter a Pendolino N-gauge. Quite looking for that's due later this year, so quite looking forward to what that's going to be like as a model. Anybody around also that's interested in the model trains as well as the real life simulations? Well, it'll be a long time before they actually go though, won't it, Jam? I mean, it depends on, I guess, how they introduce the newer models, whether they stockpile them and introduce them as a full service, or whether they run them alongside the existing locos. It's a well, I was about to talk about the East Coast Main Line. It's a busy line, so I'm not quite sure whether they've any more slots to introduce additional services. But I suspect they'll just replace the train sets one at a time, or at least until they realise that they need more trains. But they get used all over the country, don't they? So I kind of half suspect that what they'll do is put the newer sets on the flagship routes, and then repurpose the HSTs on some of the other routes where they need an uprated train, either speed or capacity wise, and then they'll go on for quite a few more years before they actually retire them altogether. I mean, they do burn a fair bit of diesel, so I understand. And of course, the main line, most of the main lines are all electrified now, so electric power is becoming king for passenger the mainline passenger operations. Oh, I didn't know it was in the game. In the game as a base model, or well, it wouldn't be in my game as a base model, I guess, because I've had it a few years. So, any particular DLC? Because I'll take a look at that. Just if only to see what it looks like. Okay, turn this tool up a bit more now. Yeah, I mean, they've been 40 years old. The maintenance on them, I think they've had some of them have had new engines in, new diesels in, haven't they? And the service costs on 40-year, well, the whatever 20 or so year old diesels must be relatively expensive. I mean, the passenger cars themselves seem to have done rather well, and maintained their been reasonably well maintained, shall we say? They've uprated the interiors on a lot of them, and even things like they've added all the what's expected these days, power sockets and Wi-Fi and things like that. So. But again, they're old ladies of those coaches these days. Generally, I live in the UK in Yorkshire, so the East Coast Main Line is my main is my local main line. For which one is it? Okay, we were mentioning earlier about the full route jam for the other train simulator, whose name escapes me. trains. There is a in their workshop there is a route which allows you to drive all the way from York to King's Cross in 2 hours in real time, 2 hours 10 minutes. It came with yeah, the sound packs. Those Armstrong Powerhouse soundtracks are supposed to be amazing. I don't actually have any. I'm not that into playing the game enough to settle on something enough to want to do things like the those sound pack upgrades. The Deltic ones are supposed. I think it's the Deltic ones. What are those? I can't remember what class the Deltics are, but they're supposed to be phenomenally lifelike as well. So the Armstrong Powerhouse, I guess, have got the again, if they haven't already got the reputation of being extremely good sound packs for whatever models they release it for. Came free with it, as in if you had like 13 or 11 or 12, whatever, they gave you it free, because I didn't actually notice that. Or do you only get it if you bought TS 2015 when it was brand new? Because that's a lot of the stuff that's, if you look at 2015, if you've been upgraded from an earlier version, you don't necessarily get all of it. You just get the core engine upgrades, and sometimes they do throw in a loco or a route or something like that. That wants to be a little bit darker, but we're getting there. Okay. Sounds a really odd one. I kind of don't like wearing headsets, but for things like Train Simulator, the sounds that the sounds that you can hear that you can't hear when it's played through speakers, kind of make it worthwhile. But it's about balancing the sound, I guess, more than the actual volume of the sound, so that the engines don't sound loud compared to whatever else you're listening to. Although those things are loud when you stood next to them. Okay. Yeah, I think I've had at least from 11, if not earlier. Okay, I'll have to have a look then. I've not fired it up for quite a while. What I keep meaning to do, I have the train whatever it is controller, which works on some locos and not others. I keep meaning to make my own version of that. Since Train Sim, as far as I'm aware, all the locos, even the Just Trains and things like that, locos support using the Microsoft game controller. So I keep thinking, well, I'll do one of these days is make myself a control cab ish thing. Looks a bit like the rail driver, but actually talks as though it's a game controller, so that it works with most of the locos. I kind of like playing like that with physical controllers. It sort of feels like more real when you have to sort of push a lever to get the to rev the engine so that you actually start the train moving, and you have to modulate it. It seems a bit more realistic than dragging a mouse backwards and forwards or using a keyboard, to be honest. Right, now then I've got to kind of get some. Do we gain some detail of the buffer beam in here, but I don't actually know whether to go for the bogies. Put some detail of the wheels in, maybe. or at least outline them. Might do that. I was just thinking, some of the people that generally watch me have been doing pussycat pictures on my normal evening streams. Just happened to have worked out that way, and here I am on a Saturday afternoon talking about trains. Somewhat different to kitty cats. Okay, so the new engines are quieter as well. Oh, interesting. Yeah, kind of saying I'm not a train nut, but so the heavy engineering, the heavy rail traffic, and those big engines kind of fascinate me. The way they're actually run, operate, and everything else like that. It's equally well a kind of a ship's power plant will interest me. With the big gas turbines or something like a 4+6 Scania truck, articulated truck or something like that. Similarly, let's see if we can get this wheel sets in. Got to make sure they sit on the rail. I was just thinking, I keep professing not to be a railway nut to some extent, but yeah, I like the trains. I like the sheer power of the engine, I guess. And I like the idea of modelling them because of I like models, but I'm just thinking that it's amazing how much of the lingo that you pick up in this. Even as knowing this is a class 66, I don't necessarily know why it's a class 66, or I'm talking about the rail, and I was thinking actually I mean the rail head, and maybe I'm more rail nut than not. Okay, let's get this other one in. That's the front bogie then. Or the back bogie. Is there a way of telling what should be the front and the back on something like this? Is there such a concept as front and back? Other than it happens to be the direction you're going happens to be the front. Just a light outline allows me some scope for mistakes if I need to change things. Though not a lot on hardboard. I did draw myself some guidelines a long time ago. They're now starting to fade because as I've been running my hand over this, I've started to rub them out. About there, I think. Yeah, there's the big simulators are like that, aren't they? Jam. I play Euro Truck Simulator. Again, it's the same sort of thing. There's something about it. That's kind of addictive that you keep wanting to try. You're doing the same thing every single time. Different road. The fact you've got a different load doesn't really make a great deal of difference, really, apart from visually, or occasionally the way in which it feels because of the weight or the way it shifts. But there's that. The farming simulator is another one, which is a really simplistic game that you can play any way you like and get sort of addictive. And I gather flight simulator's the same. I've kind of not played that for many years, so, but it was a bit like that. And yeah, the HSTs. What trains do I like? It's odd. I like trains that look nice. But as to what looks nice, the A4s, for example, the Steam A4s, I like the streamlined version. I don't like the one with the streamlining removed. Things like the Class 66 I like the look of, and the Deltics, I've forgotten what class they are, and the HSTs. There are some of the Bulldog, for example. I don't like the look of the Bulldog, even though it's fairly similar to the Deltic in a way, isn't it? But I don't know. And as I said earlier, I'd love a train. Probably one of the diesels or electrics where you actually had to do a full startup sequence from cold and dark to operational, and actually learn how to do that, because that's part of what I kind of enjoyed about playing the game, and that is, you had to learn the signalling, obviously for the different countries or regions, and learn how the train reacts, the physics of the train, how long it takes to stop and stuff like that. And I will replay a route lots and lots and lots of times, just getting better at it, and learning, I guess, as a real driver would do, learning the route, so where the signals are and stuff like that. And that's what I find fascinating about it. I kind of would play more, but I go through batches of games, so I'll play Euro Truck Simulator for a few weeks, and then I'll go on to Farming Simulator, then I'll go on to the trains. But kind of at the moment, now that I've started streaming and streaming art, I don't really get any time to play. Probably what will happen in a couple of months or something like that is, instead of streaming on a Saturday afternoon like now, I'll actually start and do play a game instead, which I probably wouldn't stream, but so it's more like that. Yeah, there are so many. I periodically will go through Steam, and it's easier on Steam, and sort of just drop things into a wish list. Look at the pictures, read the read up about the scenarios or the route, and then keep adding them in. Whether I ever get around to buying them is another matter, but from time to time I'll look at one and go, what, I want to try something new. So I might go out and get one like a Class 66 and see, just play with that for a while, and then get another one maybe after that at some point. This is beginning to look a bit more realistic now that I at least put the base of the wheels in. But that's one of the nice things I think about the about Train Simulator is there are so many. You've got the option to purchase them or not, and you can get the ones that you want to try. There's such a range there. I don't know whether they've got. Well, obviously they don't have every single loco that's ever been done, but the fact that there's so many out there just gives you such a scope to just pick and choose as to which ones you want to have a go at driving. I'm not going to be really successful at the main bogies as such with the axle boxes and things. It may well be just I may well do this just as sort of a fairly dark undercarriage. Let's add a little bit of colouring in here. I may just do this as more like blocks of colour. Now these are black, but I won't be doing them black. It's too dark a colour, generally speaking. It works a lot better to have a dark brown. Slight problem is that, a dark brown now represents the dark red as well. That wants to be as straight a line as I can make it. One of the things I'll have to start and do actually is get more into the game and take more screenshots, because they make some of the screenshots you get some really good reference images for doing things like this. Since the modelling is in the game of the engines at least, and the rolling stock is amazingly good. Yeah. Class 450. The Voyager, yeah. I'll have to have a look at those. I never really remember many of the classes, to be honest. I'll kind of go, if I see an image and it tells me what the class is, I'll go, yeah, I recognise that. And at other times I'll, like the fact that I've done, been working on this one that long that I'm going to recognise the class 66 for quite some time. But things like one of the ones that comes to mind is the class 56. I don't quite know why, but I've obviously had an interest in that for some reason. It really is kind of the only way to refer to the engines, isn't it, by the class designation, really, because otherwise, how on earth would you describe this if you didn't describe it by class? There's very few that actually, where either the name is iconic, like the Mallard or the I was going to say the Royal Scot, but the Flying Scotsman, where the name is so iconic that people actually know what it is by the name. But you say something like an A4 Pacific to somebody who will go, yeah, what's that? Is that a car or is it a boat? But you say sort of Mallard or something like that, and they kind of know what you're talking about. Although I guess most people actually probably don't know about the Mallard. It's the Flying Scotsman that most people tend to know about in engines, isn't it? Completely different class. And having said which, I can't actually remember if the Mallard holds the steam record. Yeah, Mallard holds the steam speed record, doesn't it? And I think the Flying Scotsman holds the fastest non-stop run from London to somewhere north. Yeah, I tend to like the UK trains. There's something about the UK or the European, maybe the UK styling, which I like. Sort of, some of the American ones are sort of growing on me a little bit, like the Gen set. I don't particularly like the older ones, and I'm not fantastically keen on things like the Steam Big Boy and stuff like that. I don't particularly mind Steam, but I've not really tried driving them in game a lot um, to learn actually how to do it properly. The mod engines are definitely easier to drive. Mm. Uh, Different people just like different things. Jam Jam. I mean, there's a lot of modern people that love the Steam. They were never around to see it actually running live on the network, and I'm relatively old, and I don't ever recall seeing operational service on Steam engines. I've seen them running live on the network, exhibition drives and things like that, or where they've been just moving it from location to location over the main line. And the technology for the time was amazing. I mean, the steam engines and the power of them to some extent is amazing, relatively speaking. They are, generally speaking, as fast. They just take longer to power up and shut down and keep clean. Well, keep operational, but obviously you know why they've disappeared. But technology is still fairly valid in a lot of cases. Steam power has been used quite a lot for all sorts of things, not just railway. If you think of them as the older steam engines as sort of, well, I mean they are the precursors to the diesels, but just as a an amazing technology, and you look at them from that perspective, then they can be extremely interesting to take a look at. And as I say, just what they can achieve with them was amazing. And there's the Mallard with the speed record, not many trains designed to operate at those sorts of speeds these days. I mean the HSTs are, of course, and the ice trains, but generally commuter trains are relatively slow. Nope, that's not one I've heard about. I haven't been to many of the heritage, I suppose you'd call them, lines. In fact, I haven't been to any of the heritage lines that I can think of. There's a fair few around as well. I guess I don't really qualify as a railway enthusiast, do I? If I've not been to any of the heritage lines. Yeah. Oh no, there's quite a few that are like that. Jam Jam. You know, a lot of the heritage lines. They run. They run day services as such, just in order to to do two jobs. One, obviously, to generate revenue, but also to keep the locos in running order and have something to use them on. I think there's a few around the country which actually do run operational services. So the line, whilst it's not part of the main network, actually carries passengers on a daily basis. I don't actually recall the name of them, of any of them, but I think there's at least one or two that do that. Generally, sort of countryside routes, I'm guessing, but and they'll run diesels as well as not necessarily just steam engines. I mean, a lot of diesels are heritage engines now that are retired. Things like the Deltics and stuff like that. And these light edge lines want to be vertical. If they're not going to look quite right. Yeah, it's not bad. Think of the steam lines. I don't know. Obviously, you don't see the water troughs these days on lines, and they were still around when I was a young lad, as they say. Although I don't think they'd actually been used for many years. If you see, actually, I've never looked on YouTube, but I guess there probably are some there. Some of the older films of some of the big passenger steam locos that scoop water as they go. There's some sort of really spectacular pictures of those or film of that happening. Now, how's that wheel set? And we've got a ladder there as well. Okay. I'm going to sort of yeah, I'm not really going to be able to represent the main bogie carriage that well, but I'll just sort of add what might be called in 3D modelling terms some greebles. Little bits and pieces that stick out and in the model serve no purpose other than to make an interesting surface. I'm not going to be able to represent the detail of the full undercarriage of one of these things with all the pipes and connectors and beams and things. Yeah, they do though. It's as you mentioned earlier, they cost a lot of money to run. and it's money that they can't afford really to do. Nobody really wants to pay sort of train tickets that are twice what it would be if they replaced something with a modern engine. And of course, if they didn't, they'd be out of business. Which is kind of daft, because then all those people that don't want to pay, double the price for a train ticket, will then go to something like a heritage rail and pay 4 times for the price for a ticket on a shorter run. It's kind of weird in a way. But just economics. But that even happened in the Steam Age as well. They either got replaced from their whatever service they were supporting, and they may have got moved into like a shunting or stuff like that, or a branch line, and moved off the main line and got replaced on the main line by the newer engines. Or even back then, passengers liked the newer engines, the newer technologies. Actually, let's darker this side of it. So if I do it this side, then how far do we come down? Yeah, about that far. That's going over. Yeah, it's foreshortened. Yeah, it's a lot of people perhaps would be surprised at just how much it costs to keep a line open. And we I know it's Beaching closed a lot of lines down, and it's kind of pity. I mean, where I live, there isn't a disused line. The line has now, the rail bed has now been torn up, and actually it is now a road. But it would have been lovely to. I was about to say, it would have been lovely to be able to sort of just walk to the top of the road to get on a train, but there again, I probably would not have been living here if that had been the case, because trains are noisy things, and I not necessarily want to live next to a noisy rail line. But it's even when a rail itself may only need replacing once every 25 years because of wear or something like that. There's just so much rail down in the country that it's being replaced all the time. It's not by any means a lay it down and forget about it technology. And then on top of that, of course, you've got all the signalling technology and the train protection systems and everything like that designed to prevent crashes or derailments. Yeah, it is big business. It's not as big in the UK as it might be in some other countries. I mean, some other countries seem to have really included it as part of either daily life or their transportation strategies. And some countries like the US, where the sizes are such that it's a really useful technology for transport purposes of goods. Because air freight would be expensive and road freight is relatively long, whereas some of the American trains that are 3 or 4 locos plus 60, 100 or whatever carriages that they're towing with double stacked freight containers on, you just couldn't shift that amount of stuff by road in the same sort of time, or at least not without completely clogging up the roads. So I've got something, probably a battery box in there. Diesel tank, I think it is there. So the bogie stops round about here. Okay. I have never actually drawn with pyrography, drawn a locomotive before, so this is interesting to try and just see if I can manage to do it. Don't really have much idea about what it is I'm drawing either, which is interesting. That could actually be an advantage, not knowing what it's supposed to be, because that way I don't have any preconceived ideas of what it's supposed to look like. I have to actually do what I see. Now it's dark down there. Yeah, they do. Well, I don't know exactly what their maintenance schedules are, but they certainly on the UK rail network there are measurement trains that travel the country on a daily basis, effectively laser scanning the railway and photographing the railheads and the sleepers and all the rail chairs and everything like that. They even sort of doing things like scanning the brickwork in tunnels and vegetation, so that they know where they've got to go to cut stuff back, or whether there's danger of trees falling and things like that. So yeah, a heck of a lot goes on. It's a lot. Potentially it's a lot faster than it used to be. You used to have track walkers that did that sort of thing, or the engine drivers reporting things. Now they actually have trains that go out that measure the track to sub-millimetre accuracy, and they do things like measure vibration off the rail, so they can tell if a sleeper's loose, or they can tell if the rail is rough or too shiny, and they do things like traction checks as well while they're doing it, and they do all that sort of stuff at about 60 miles an hour. There's some amazing technology in there. they use, actually, interestingly, they at least, because it's sometimes see one parked at Doncaster. There's at least one HST which is used as a measurement train. Coco Pilot, hi there, good evening, or good afternoon, sorry. I'm so used to streaming on an evening that I'm getting the time wrong. It's only 3:45 here in the UK. And how are you? Just, I think, going to be doing sort of vague shapes around the axles here. Oh yes, a lot of it's done at night, but they do they do the odd slots in the daytime as well. Obviously, as you say, they stay out of the way at peak times, but that's one reason why they actually use high-speed capable trains, is that they can actually run in a normal, like on a normal HST slot, and they don't have to sort of do it at 30 miles an hour and compete with the goods transport and take up a goods slot and things like that. So. But generally, yes, as you say, they'll stay away from the peak hours. But outside of that, you will see them running during the day. As it tends to make it easier for them to run during the day. People prefer to work during the day, and they can do visual checks a lot easier during the day. Okay. No, I've never seen one running on the network. I've only ever seen one as a passing Doncaster. But part of the work I used to do brought me in contact with some of the companies that operate them. So I do have a little bit of familiarity with them from a few years ago. Things continuously change. They generate gigabytes of data, or even terabytes of data on a run, and then it all gets analysed by computer. Fascinating technology goes into it, and the mapping and everything else. So we're going to go to about there. It's about that right position there, and that sort of. I guess that's. I'm just quite often when I'm doing this, I'll sort of half talk to myself in a shorthand, which is just the sort of words you just heard me sort of speaking, and I'm really just trying to work out where things go, and I'm not actually really even trying to make sense to myself. It really is just a means of solidifying my own thoughts as I go along. So, anybody else that's watching play Train Simulator? If so, what's your favourite locos and routes? Jam there prefers the modern UK locos and high speed stuff. I'm kind of a bit. I prefer the locos I like the look of. Yeah, so am I. Thank you, Jam. Just encouraging other people to join in if they want. I know there's probably quite a few people that are lurking, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I frequently do that on a lot of streams, but especially because I tend to have lots of streams up at the same time. But I don't often join in. But so if people want to just sit and watch, that's quite alright with me. But if you want to join in, please do so. I don't think Jam bites. He's not shown any indication of such behaviour at the moment, so and I certainly don't. And the pussycat that might is not in residence at the moment, so that's quite alright. And you're safe anyway. If he was going to bite anybody, it'd be me. This one's oh dear. I kind of would have said the same thing myself, Tillybug. I don't know a lot about trains, but it's kind of surprising how much I've picked up just by either playing Train Simulator or the fact that I am interested in the nearish, or at the end of this year, next year, making an N gauge or even a T gauge model railway. For the modelling aspects, I'd love to automate it. I love the automation bit about it, and I'm kind of amazed at just how much I've picked up in doing that. You never know. Few days, Tilly, we may have you talking classes and axle configurations and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I'm somewhat at least twice your age, Jam. Not that I actually feel any different to the last time I thought of how old I was. So even back then I didn't I don't particularly think I feel any different. This wants to be darker than that there, so I've got a darker still, so halfway between that and that. Yeah, okay. It's been quite a nice, interesting stream. I've said next to nothing about pyrography on the whole stream, which makes a change. Although I don't mind answering questions if anybody does have any questions on what you're seeing me do. Dear. Okay, I've achieved a shade about what I want it to do there. Indeed it does. Indeed it does. They're not cheap things, Jam Jam. You just have to take it slowly. And build up from there. That's the trick with all of these. You know, it's like the real train simulator. I am sure the amount of DLC that you've got now, if you added up the cost of it, is somewhat more than you would have thought you would be paying when you first bought 2011. It just creeps up on you. And you can do the same thing with train. You know, there's the initial outlay again of probably a single train set and a small amount of track, and then a controller. But then you just add to it as time comes. And if you do things like create the scenery yourself rather than just necessarily going out and buying pre-made scenery, you know, so you instead of going out and buying a platform, you get card or plastic sheet and build it yourself. Then it becomes cheap. I was about to say cheaper. That's a bit of an odd word, but it doesn't cost you as much money. It takes longer to do, but you know, you develop skills and you get some fun out of doing that as well. And at the end of it, it's something you've made for yourself. And just build up from there. And you buy a bit more track, or you buy a set of points, and you just go from there. It doesn't have to be all done in one go. And then that's going to come up to this. It's whole heavy. This centre axle support, or the centre bit of the bogie there. I can't really tell what it's supposed to look like. Yes, true. I guess. I mean, but that's like anything, isn't it? Really. The way kind of the way around that is just to look at what other people have done, see how they do it. I mean, the way one of the things that I would like to do is get a T-gauge. Now, T-gauge railway. I could probably fit a layout on this A4 board. I probably want to make a slightly larger one, but there is the layout for, and actually there's a HST, by the way, in T-gauge, just in case you didn't know, which is why I'm kind of attracted to it. But I've got another idea in mind for why I want T-gauge ultimately. An oval of traffic. It comes with a controller, and so the way in which probably start is just with the oval of track and just run it around the track, and I'm sure it will get boring fairly quickly. But then I've got balsa wood around here. I do carving, for example, so it wouldn't particularly take me long to, I don't know, carve a platform out of that, or build one for plastic cars, for example, which I also have for other reasons. But if you're a clay modeler, you could use clay, or if you've got a 3D printer, then you can do a 3D model and create a print, or do a model and get someone else to print it. So you can sort of build up from there. Start with something that probably, because you need to keep your enthusiasm, so start with the basic loop of track, really, and a single engine. Even at double O gauge, I know the train sets start at UK wise about 100 to 150, 200 pounds, something like that. But at least you've got something to, in quotes, play with. I kind of don't really like that word, because it implies childish behaviour, which it kind of isn't. You're modelling operations, and it's a real railway engine. It's just a very small one. It's not a toy, really. So it's a bit of a word, but Can you make a HST PLES? Sorry, I don't understand the PLES. T-gauge is a bit odd though, in that. I think the HST train set actually contains three of the cars which actually have motors in, and it magnetically grabs the track as well. Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It just develops a different level of skill. Construction of those models themselves are, take a level of skill which you can apply. The next stage, if you like, from building those models. Are you actually meaning you actually buy them ready built? If you mean you buy the kits and build them, then it's just it's the next level of skill is to actually make your own parts. Can you make a HST? Yeah, I'm not about to start one now, but yes, probably. Sorry, I'm not into the text type speak these days. It takes me longer to type text speak than it does to type the actual word. But yeah, no, I don't have any particular problem with that. I just I happen to have quite a few pictures of the Class 66 around because I came across them, I liked them, and I was using them as reference to draw my own version of electronically draw my own version of a Class 66. So I sort of took my own drawing plus a couple of references, one of which you see at the bottom left, which is the closest one to this that I'm doing here, and just I decided I wanted to do some pyrography, so I just went ahead and did it, and that's where it came from. But if I to pick another loco, I'd quite easily pick a HST or something like that. It's kind of we probably only do the loco, but you'd see a little bit of the maybe the first class or the second class, depending on whether you're doing the DVT or the drive engine. But I don't particularly have a problem. They're easier to do as well because you don't have all this underneath detail of the of the bogey structure and the underneath support beams and things that you do on these. So no, I wouldn't have a problem in doing that. Not sure when it'll be though. It will partially depend on when I whether I do it on my main stream or just on the Saturday stream. Mainstream rotation, I'm just finishing off in the process of starting to finish the cat, so then I'll move on to using scraper board, then do a carving piece. So my next pyrography piece on the mainstream will probably be about 2 weeks away, and I'm not sure whether I'd go something like a railway engine. I might pick something which might appeal to more people. Can't quite think what it might be at this moment in time, because I would like to do something other than a cat, even if other than a big cat. Perhaps it might be a portrait or something like that. But certainly as an ad hoc stream, I'd quite happily do a HST. I kind of would like to do a series of engines. Yeah, I'm familiar with Corgi. Other Corgi models, yeah. Yeah, Corgi have been around a long time. Corgi was around when I was a really young kid. Little tiny die-cast models. And other Corgi cars and things like that. You youngsters, you see. thinking like that, do I know of Corgi? Kind of I don't know about these days, but back then they were kind of the only model. I suspect that Matchbox, I guess, was the other one, but yeah. Or are they the same thing? Oh dear, as you get older, your memory fails. It kind of looks a bit odd, but just a bit more colour to it. Oh, you mean they get Airfix models are the ones that I always used to do because I used to like making things. The one model I always wanted to get was was it a 1/16 scale Spitfire? The big models. I always liked the big models. The Saturn V, well, you might not know, but Saturn V rocket used to stand about 3 foot tall. Never was a fan of the old sailing ships, but the odd, more modern warships, not because they're warships, but because I liked the way they looked. Never particularly a fan of the model Airfix cars, but I'm trying to think if they ever did any railway engines. Don't really know. A lot of the war stuff, warplanes, warships, they were around, but the big must have been either a 16th or a 24th scale Spitfire. Always wanted to do one of those, never did. I did what kids always did back then, of course, with the planes that were hung from cotton from the ceiling. Yeah, they're more of a collector's thing now, aren't they? Rather than back when I was a lad, they were toys to play with. But yeah, I mean it's sort of nice, when they start supplying information like that, so you actually understand more about what it is that you've got in front of you, the history or the heritage of it. Now then, I've got to get 2 lots of steps into this. So that's about the bottom of the main master support beam. So we're going to come down here. I'm avoiding using a pencil because if I use a pencil on here and I don't erase it, it gets cooked in to the brown, and it doesn't look so good. I've kind of not realised this. I tend to, so I won't say I do things actually freehand, but I do tend to only just do normally very faint lines, and I'll tend to do a drawing and then transfer the drawing using a wax type transfer, not a wax, a graphite transfer method onto the working piece. This one I did with a pencil, and I know pencil's graphite, but it's thick. It's somewhat thicker, and it's sort of cooked in, and I probably can't get rid of it now, so it's got like a dark outline, but I sort of learnt not to do that again. So these handrails start there. So I'm now sort of drawing with this tool. So that's about the end of that one there, so it goes underneath there. Can't actually draw using white. That would require me to actually use paint or something like that to do it, which I could do actually, embellish, but normally the way in which you do white is you don't colour it, or any lighter colours for that moment. You don't actually colour it as darkly. So things like these handrails, which probably look white, I certainly kind of do here. They're white because you see in the contrast of the colour around them. I didn't actually colour them in, so you kind of got to leave them. There are techniques to scrape colour away, and it's the sort of thing I do with the cats, but on this board scraping doesn't work too well. So I've now got to get the other one in. One of the nice things is that the tread step that goes across on the reference, which you probably can't see, but it doesn't actually look as though it joins up to the rail, so I don't have a problem with leaving gaps, which is nice. And that one tucks underneath as well. There. Now I'll just draw the other side of this in, so I know what to leave blank. Uh, 172, 176. I never understood why they never actually used the same scale, you know. Because they do that with other things as well. They do things, well, not necessarily, the Corgi there, but other manufacturers. I do remote control trucks, which are 1/24th scale, and yet they. I also have a tank which is I think it's something like 1/20th scale, I think. So it's slightly larger. 1/16 scale. Oh, maybe the truck's 1/12 scale. I know I can't actually remember now. But the tank and the truck are very slightly different scales. Now, luckily, they're close enough to each other to sort of look reasonable. But yeah, it's kind of like, well, if you're going to do, and it's just, they're from the same manufacturer. It's kind of like if you're going to do 1/16 for the tanks, why couldn't you do 1/16 for the trucks? Or if you're going to do 1/12 for one, why not 1/12 for the other? Then they look alright when they're together. 80 Stobart trucks and they're 1 to 50 but they look big. My 114 scale trucks are going to look ginormous then. Yeah, it's all relative stuff, but I mean, it's kind of like if you want it to, if you put one of your Eddie Stobart trucks by the side of, one of your buses, they should be about the same size, and yet your bus will look, relatively speaking, quite tiny next to it, or at least disproportionately small. So you can't put, if you were one that like creating dioramas, for example, you couldn't actually put the two in the same diorama because of that. Or you'd have to cheat and use like a false perspective where your truck's in the foreground, so it's bigger, and your bus is further in the background, so it doesn't look at you don't expect it to look bigger, and so you force the perspective. It looks to be further away than it actually is. No, switch pens. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? But of course, in real life, as I say, they should be about the same size. Yeah, give a little bit, depending just on which bus it is and things like that. But they should be roughly about as tall as each other. How long does it take to do one of these trains? The answer is I don't know. This is the first one I've done. So I can't actually answer your question on that one. There's about 8 hours in this so far. If I just show you some other things, so these two, for example, there's 20 hours there. This one, when it's done, will be about 20 hours. It's about 16 at the moment. This, depending on how much detail I add into this, or can get into this, and how much of the background I do, taking a guess, and how much patience I have to try and do all the detail that I can possibly get in there. 30-40 hours maybe, something like that. It's I literally don't know that. I'm kind of guessing, and if I don't do a background to it, then obviously it'll be less. If I try and put some sort of background shading in, which maybe I don't need on there, but possibly some at the bottom, some sleeper detail and maybe some yard detail to correspond to what's in the reference picture, then that will add some time on. The looking bit, how easy it looks, depends on skill level, of course. Hopefully I'm making it not look too hard, because that's if I, the easier I make it look, it means the better the level of skill I've got in doing it. I've only spent about 200 hours in total doing pyrography, and that's about 10 pieces of work. So they're generally about 20 hours a piece, roughly on average. But quite what this one will be, I don't know. What could go wrong doing one? I make something. Well, it depends. On this wood, I make something too dark. Is the main thing, or I make a line, a mark in the wrong place, which is too dark. I don't have a great deal of scope on this wood to correct mistakes like that. There's two main ways in which you can correct a mistake of the kind where, let's say I wanted to erase this ladder I've started to do here. One way of doing it is to abrade it, effectively rub it out, but you can't use an eraser. You use like a scalpel and scrape, so like a scalpel, and scrape the colour away. Now that also scrapes away the surface of the wood. This being hardboard, which is a constructed surface and is very, very smooth, then if I scrape it away, I actually make the surface rough. And when I try and put colour back over the top, it's quite difficult to get it to match. And what I scraped away will tend to stand out. And it's experience says it's not very good to try and scrape stuff away afterwards. There is some scope, but not a lot. And if you're doing that, it wants to be the final colour. So if I'm going to, let's say, scrape a little bit of colour out here to leave the white rail, that's alright, because I'm not going to try and go over it again afterwards. The other way in which I can sort of correct a mistake is by effectively hiding it. So if I've made a mark in I don't know, let's say in the doorway here, there's a little bit of one, but let's say if I made that mark and I didn't actually want that mark there, what I can do is make the colour of this upper part of the door dark enough so you can't see that mark. But the upper part of this door is meant to be yellow, which is a lighter colour than the red that's around it. So if I darken this down to hide the mark, I've got to darken this red area down even more. Now that's doable depending on just how dark the mark is. If it's just a slight burn, a slightly darker mark, then that's doable. If I was to try and do it here, this grill area, for example, which is dark with sort of black grill behind it, I can't really get that any darker, and therefore, because I want that to be darker than the area around it, I've got a limiting factor, and so basically I can't correct that little mark there, and similar marks elsewhere on here. I can't actually correct them. I can potentially minimize them by a few subtle shading tricks, or after the fact I may be able to do a little bit of scraping to remove it, but without making it white. On a different wood like this, which is birch, I can scrape this away a lot more easily without any of the problems, because it's not a super smooth surface. Scraping it away will leave me with a surface which takes the colour almost as well as the top surface did, so I don't have as much problem. I still have the technique of darkening things around it as well, and because this wood is lighter and I start lighter, then I have more range to go at to darken things down. As you can see, there's quite a contrast between this and this colour. This colour is only slightly darker than the background here, so I can't, I can make this darker still, to match any of these tones, but with the background here I can't go any lighter than this particular colour. So there is some scope. How often do they go wrong? Probably quite a lot of the time, but it's there are lots of mistakes on. Sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does. This loco, for example, of course, is very shiny, and being very shiny, it will pick up environmental colours. If there's a tree nearby, you'll get a shadow, or you'll get a reflection. There's reflections down the side of the loco, which is from buildings that are around it. So sort of variations like this, down here for example, the variation in colour, it wasn't what I intended, and I might do something later on to try and smooth them out a bit. But equally well, it sort of represents the reflections that are in the environment anyway, and it sort of looks a little bit more natural in that respect. So sometimes mistakes are they mistakes, or just a natural variation type of thing. Occasionally I do make a really bad mistake. Let's say I'd written EMS instead of EWS, then I'd either go something along the lines of, okay, well, this was practice and it's really bad practice, so I'm going to really just try some weird techniques out, or something that I wouldn't normally try, because I know I'm not going to display it, I'm not going to do anything with it, it's going in the round portfolio after it's finished. So I might try using a really hot pen and just seeing if I can control it, because it doesn't matter, I've already effectively abandoned the piece. But otherwise I'll try and work with it, because I don't want to get sort of 3/4 of the way through a piece and make a mark and go, well, I've got to start again. I want to be able to learn how to work around and correct it, or at least do something that means it's not visible at the end. So even mistakes are practice as well. Right. Yeah, a bit of greeble in there. Actually, the black pen, the pen is better for what I'm just about to try and do, so I shall switch over and turn it down. That's quite alright, I don't mind explaining anything. This pen having a finer tip means that I can get more concentrated heat, and I can actually make it this sort of edge, which is kind of like a shadowish edge, quite dark quite easily, with a lot more control about exactly where I want it to be than I can do with the other tip, which is called a shader. Just want this darker so when I apply the darker area under here, you still see a shadow which is sort of referenced there on the reference picture, but it just helps you distinguish the fact that it's a three-dimensional object and that the handrails are actually not the stud out from the thing that's underlying it. Now I'm just going to apply some marks, basically just around random sort of marks a little bit, and I'll do some elsewhere as I progress along this underbody, because I'm not going to be able to represent all the shapes and the pipes that are underneath, so I'll just hint at them being there. Bit more heat. And there we've got that stepping. I'll just see if I can make it a nice straight edge so it actually looks a little bit better. It looks a bit rough at the moment. Now in reference the step's yellow and the handrails are white, but and I could make it yellow just by applying it sort of a light colouring over the top, but I'm not going to bother. I might do that afterwards if it still looks like it needs it, but at this stage we then have that first step in. We talk about the game, I guess. I can go to Aberdeen now. What? East Coast. Okay. Let's say I'm only aware of the a Scottish section and the. Oh, sorry. You mean the real main line? Okay. Yeah, one train per day because of how long it is. Yeah, I realised when you said of one train per day. Yeah, what's that going to be, a 6-hour route? That's what. Yeah, from London. from King's Cross, I guess. What would be 2 hours to Leeds, 3.5, 4 hours to Newcastle. So if you're going up to Aberdeen, that's probably at least another 1.5, 2 hours. Yeah, I'm going to think he probably needs. Just trying to think, the driver would probably have to stay overnight up in there, or at least deadhead back. I can't see a driver driving both directions. That must be an interesting scheduling exercise for them as well. Would it be one train in each direction though per day? I guess sort of both leave at 9 o'clock and then both turn round and come back at 6 o'clock at night or something like that. Tend not to travel on trains very much these days either. A lot of driving. Sorry, no, not. I was supposed to say a lot of driving. I drive a lot because the trains where I go, either there aren't any, or they'll take quite a long time to get there, where it's actually quicker by car. And I'm not averse to the train, but when I'm going these distances, I'm usually working, so I'd like to sort of get back home on the night and not have to wait for a train and get home at 10 o'clock at night. What time are we? 4:45. Let's do a little bit more for a quarter of an hour, and then I might just switch and do something else for about half an hour, and then I'll take a break before my evening stream. But I'm not doing that just yet, so. Okay, these handrails on the lower stairs are black, so we're going to make them black. I'm going to use this pen. I use this pen quite a bit of heat, relatively speaking. So if I make these dark, they'll stand out, because what I'll do around it is going to be lighter. Yeah, that'll do. Just in case anybody's wondering, when I said things like that, that'll do, it doesn't mean that it's bad and I'm not bothering to fix it. It means it is of good enough quality for me to be happy with leaving it like that. So it's an expression of I've achieved what I intended to do, not it's so bad I can't do anything about it. Alright, there we go. They look dark enough. Yep, they do. 9 hours and 15 minutes. Oh, blimey. Yeah. Are they sleeper trains? Or are they just standard? I'm not sure there is any sleepers on the HSTs, is there? More power! This area will be made a bit darker, but just take it steady then. If I make a mistake, I can fix it. Yeah. The axle box is just underneath that. Okay, that's not too bad. Not great, but not too bad. So we'll come back to that later and add more detail in there. Class 225 and HST, yeah. I can see me if I stream in this area quite a lot. I'm going to need to get myself a trim recognition a chart. So when somebody says things like a class 91, I can actually go, oh yeah, that's what a class 91 looks like. I know what the 225 looks like, and obviously the HST, but and some of the others, but yeah. Yeah. It's coming along, is this? It's coming along. So I've been doing 3 hours. Yeah, just an example, Jam 3 hours. I've been doing this, and effectively I've done this below the windows. I did do a bit more colour around the front windows here, the windscreen, but down here, all this area down here, and underneath the main body, I've started. But that's it in 3 hours. That's give you an indication of how long sometimes this can take. I'm not that experienced, so I'm guessing that as I develop more experience, then I will be able to work faster or more easily. With more heat control of the pen, for example, would help do that. But that is only a guess. It's difficult to know. Now you know why artwork of any kind, which always takes longer than people think, is why they're not always as cheap as you think they should be. What I am just thinking about is taking a little rest from pyrography for a little bit more of the stream, because about 5:30 I'll stop for my tea. But I think I'll just switch to doing something a bit different, because I normally start another stream about 8 o'clock at night, and I'll be doing the cats, so I'll be in a different section. Then I'll be over in creative, and if anybody's watching who's never checked out creative, I recommend that you do. You see people doing all sorts of things like this, carving, digital drawing, but there's sculptors in there, there's people making chainmail and all sorts of stuff. Some very interesting streams to check out. But because I'm going to be streaming pyrography again tonight to do more of my pussycat, this one, from 8 o'clock, I think I'm just going to have a slight change now, and do a slightly different art form. I'm actually going to do the same engine. So I'm just going to take my headset off while I just get a pair of scissors. Oops, and then I shall be back. Just a moment. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to try, just for a little bit, a different art form. Again, still the same class 66, so I will change the stream title just a little bit. We're not going to be burning it, we're going to be punching it. That is assuming I can spell correctly. And there we go. So I shall put this pyrography piece away. May do some more of this tomorrow, or we may do some more next Saturday. We shall see. I won't be finishing on my mainstream on an evening, at least not for a while anyway. But that's a practice piece, so I shall just put that to one side. I'm now going to do something else.